Hello and welcome to Boardnell's Cult Rants, and on this video I will be reviewing Stranger Things Season 3 Episode 1, and the episode is called Suzie, Do You Copy? And obviously I'll get into who the Suzie is and what the title is referring to. So yeah, the return of Netflix's big show, if you like, big coming of age teen sci-fi show. Been up about a month now, a bit less, much highly anticipated. They of course took a bit longer this time in getting the third season up. There was only a year's gap between season 1 and season 2, whereas this year they've taken the extra year, and well, I'll get into my thoughts, but I think certainly you can see how that decision might have paid off. Of course, people weren't as hot on season 2 as the first season, which really got massive acclaim and really captured the imagination in 2016. The second season, I think the general feeling was it was a bit slow getting going, which was a little bit odd considering, it's a second season. If anything, you would expect that more from the first season, but it was, the pacing was a little bit slow at the beginning, and also there was the much talked about episode 7, which for many didn't really work, or they weren't so keen on, and I include myself in that. I wasn't so keen on episode 7, but the season overall was still good. It was still a strong season. Of course, it introduced the character of Max, who, really settled in nicely, and it was still a good season once it got going, but overall it wasn't as good as the first season, or that was the general opinion anyway. So much anticipation what they're going to do with this third season, and so there's a couple of big themes this season, I think. One is they're playing very much on the Cold War. So again, one of the appeals of Stranger Things is how it really moves with the times. How it, really focuses on, the politics of the time. It does tend to cover that. So we get that in the first scene. We get, because the bulk of this season is set in 1985, but the first scene is actually set in 1984. So we get a Russian lab, basically, Russian scientists, and they're basically experimenting, and they've got this really high-tech sort of power laser, I guess might be the best word to describe it, and essentially they're trying to crack open the wall, the alien wall, to the sort of spacecraft or to the whatever it is. And so they're unsuccessful, but the commander sort of says, you've got 1 year basically, so that nicely sets us up to jumping forward to 1985, which is where, as I said, this season is set. So certainly the Cold War is going to be a big part this season, and it has been sort of teased in previous seasons, so this is, some good continuity where they've set this up quite early on, and then, it's obviously going to play a big part in this season. The other big thing, well, certainly similar thing, but obviously quite different, is the mall. The introduction of malls into American society, and I'll get to that in a moment actually, because I do have some thoughts to that, but I'll do it once I get to when the mall first appears. But what we're getting certainly from this first episode is a very relatable teen sort of experience, quite true to what pretty much all of us go through at some point. So obviously at the end of last season there was a couple of pairings, Max got together with Lucas, and also 11, or L for short, she got together with Mike. And so I think what it does is it picks up this season, and it's really showing how that can cause tension, essentially. You know, how it can, come in between friends, or it can maybe, when you're at a certain age, they are at the crucial stage of adolescence, how things change, and how that can come in the way of friendship, sort of thing, or how you feel more distant from your friends. So, I mean, I think at the start of this season, we see the group being very fractured, and, not quite being the same old group that we saw at the start of the show. And I think what's good is, because we're invested in these characters, and we care about what happens, and we care about seeing them have that close bond again, then, we want to see that change. We want to see them come back together, and, hopefully that's going to happen by the end of the season. And of course, it's a big thing of the show, then the teens, or the pre-teens, whatever you want to say, are the big, the big characters, and they are the ones who essentially are fighting, the forces of evil, to use the cliche. But so yeah, that's obviously a big thing. But I think one example in this, we sort of see when they meet up at the mall, and Mike's a bit late, and he's obviously been with Elle, and kind of Lucas makes a comment, you're picking your girlfriend over your best sort of friend, your best friends, and that. And I think that's a very relatable comment. You can imagine, someone actually saying that. And another thing is this sense of Mike and Al, they're sort of spending all their time together, every day, and we find out it's been 6 months since they got together, and essentially pretty much every day they've been together. And I think we see how that can really weigh on people's nerves, and how, it gets on Hopper's nerves, it gets on obviously Mike's and their friend nerves. So that's all very relatable stuff, I think. And also, I think with Will this season, it's going to affect him big time. We already see that in this episode. It's a big thing, because obviously Will's this strange character who, obviously at the start of season 1, he disappeared, he was abducted, and that obviously was the big mystery of that season, if you like. So he was missing for most of the first season, and then came back into it at the end, and then in season 2. So yeah, Will's in this funny place where essentially he missed a year of being with the group. And I think, again, that's a nice little metaphor, because I think any time, and this probably doesn't just apply to teenagers, but I mean, any time you used to being in a group, and then you're away from that group for quite a long time, then often you find they're moving at a faster pace than you, or there's changes that's happened which you're not prepared for. And we see with Will in this episode, then he just wants to get back to how they were. He just wants to play Dungeons and Dragons and all that sort of stuff, which they were actually doing, I think, in the first scene of the pilot originally, the first episode of season 1. So yeah, that's going to be a big side to Will, I think, this season. And obviously he feels isolated with, the sort of the changes, the romances and what have you. And but also Will, because he's gone through that experience, then I think he's starting to sense stuff. We see in the cinema in this episode, then he is sensing a presence, so he is sensing then kind of, yeah, that alien presence sort of thing. So he does have that intuitive sense. So yeah, it's looking like an interesting season for Will. And I will go around all the main characters, but yeah, to set it up, that is a big part of the dynamic this season, or at least in this first episode. And so basically that they meet up at the mall, as I was saying, and they basically sneak into a movie, and the movie is Day of the Dead, which is the third part of George A. Romero's original trilogy. He did more later on, but originally just a trilogy. Day of the Dead, and again, that's a very coming of age relatable thing for a teenager, you know, sneaking into movies that you obviously weren't old enough to see legally. You know, I've done it myself. Every teen does it, or a lot of teens do it, let's say. And again, it's this very relatable sense of excitement and forbidden sort of, you know, going into this unknown world in a way. And I think it's that idea of, you know, if you're sneaking in to see a movie like this and you're underage, it's actually more of a thrill than if you just saw it for legal. You know, I think when you turn 18 and you can see it legally, it's probably not quite the same. You know, I think if you get to see it when you're underage and you're sneaking in, and it feels like rebelling sort of thing. And so, yeah, I think and I should mention Steve lets them in, because Steve is now working at the ice cream parlour at this new mall. He's obviously wearing the cheesy, you know, uniform, the sailor's out uniform, which is sort of the theme of the ice cream parlour. And I'll get to Steve in a few moments, but he lets them in because there's a back entrance basically that he knows. So I sort of like that, the fact he knows the mall, and he's letting these kids into this like R-rated film or whatever it would be. And I think it's really good. Then it really captures the energy of youth and the energy of them in the cinema and experiencing this film. And what happens, which is really good, is then they start the film off, and then seconds into it, the power goes out, and we find out the power has gone out around town. And it's basically a blackout, and you know, it's sort of suggested then something to do with the Russians, or it could just be a coincidence, but it's hinted it could be the Russians. So it goes down, but then it goes back up like a minute later, sort of thing. And what I love about that is just the contrast in reaction. You know, the audience are really bummed out when it goes down, and they'd be, oh, come on, you know, sort of thing. But then the contrast, they cheer and get really excited when it goes back up. And I just love that impressionistic sort of, I'm not sure that's a word, but you know what I mean, youth, and it just looks really good on watching that on screen, you know, their reactions watching this film, and then as it goes off and goes back on. But it really gets that energy, and I think there is something quite true about that as well. So that's all good stuff. And I think I'll take this chance to talk about the mall, actually, and the theme of the mall, because I think it's an interesting location, and it's a really effective location visually and cinematically for this show. I think, they really capture the energy and the colours and just the traffic, and just how busy malls are and what have you. And so cinematically, it's a really good visual location for the show. And I think it again lends to that, youth and being, really seduced and impressed by these things. It's kind of sometimes when you go to your first sporting match or something like that when you're a kid or something, how you just get blown away in a way you don't so much as an adult. You step out into that big arena and you are captivated, sort of thing, and it's that sense of wonder that's so great about youth in a say. So it's similar here. I think it's like showing how to a teen, just this new mall, this up-end outlet with all these stores, these clothes stores, these obviously a cinema, and all these obviously eating locations and stuff like that. It can just really be, as I said, captivating to a kid when you first walk in. But I think what it's also doing, which is a good thing, is it is sort of like focusing on the negative aspects on the mall. So they do bring up the fact that, then it's had a negative effect on the local economy, or certainly as far as little businesses go. And, in a town like this, Hawkins, it's a small town American setting. So I think it is a good example where those sorts of stores are sort of the heart and soul of the community. So it's showing the negative effect a mall can have on them. And it's also, showing this, painting this very sinister capitalist sort of picture, and this idea of just people getting seduced by the mall and being seduced by all these things, all these options, and not just kids but people in general, and how we almost become like animals sometimes, if you want to put it like that, almost like zombies, which is a good metaphor for a show like this, and just how it overtakes us, and the fact that these places tend to be pricey as well sometimes, and obviously to an extent you're paying for quality, but I think that is an interesting thing the show is doing, exploring the negatives as well as the positives, and it's a good visual location. So that's kind of my feelings on the mall, and it's obviously going to be a big location this season. Steve's in the mall. He's working in the ice cream parlour, and he has essentially a wing man, if you want, wingman / girl, and that is Robin. So a new character on the show, Robin, played by Maya Hawkes. And you'll notice the surname Hawkes, and also when you see her, you'll see a striking resemblance, and that is because she is the daughter of Ethan Hawke and of Uma Thurman, and you will see a striking resemblance of Uma Thurman as you go along. But Robin, a new character this season, so Steve's co-worker, and essentially in this episode she keeps setting him up to fail, but he basically is trying to chat up girls, trying to use his sales pitch as sort of come-ons. And the hilarious side of it is that Robin actually has this scoreboard, and on one side she's written, you rule, and on the other side you suck. And so depending on if he gets anywhere or fails, and not surprisingly he's failed every time. There's like 5 or something like that X's, so on the you suck side. But it's just a great little character thing, the fact that she goes to the trouble of making this board just to mock him, because she sort of knows that he's not doing very well. And she keeps referencing the fact like he knows kids, so when Dustin comes in later, how many kids do you know? Which is really funny. But she's a really good character, or certainly in this first episode she gets off to a good start. She's really dry and sarcastic, and I think a good foil for Steve. They're quite different, so they play off each other quite well, and yeah, a good start for Robin on the show. And we also see Lucas's sister Erica pop up at the mall. And so, yeah, she's going to be a bigger character this season. She only really had a couple of scenes last season. But again, a gem of a character just from those couple of scenes. So she's going to be a big part this season also. But I mentioned Dustin there, so I'll get to his sort of story. And that is that he comes home from science camp. So he's been gone all summer. So again, it's a similar thing. He's a bit out of the loop. And there's this really cool scene actually where he first gets home and basically he thinks his toys have come to life to scare him. And yeah, anyone would freak out. I would freak out. I wouldn't know what was going on. But lo and behold, it's Elle. She's using her magic for devious purposes. She's brought the toys to life. And of course, Dustin is freaking out. And this is sort of a good setup because 11 using her powers is going to be a big thing this season, I think. So it's sort of set up here, and I'll mention more about that in a minute. But yes, so Dustin freaks out as you would, but then there's a nice side because they actually have a welcome home banner for him, so surprises him. So that's a sweet moment as well, which brought it round. But a friendly little prank, let's say, before that. So yeah, the Suzie of the title, I guess that brings us on to, because Dustin claims that he's come up with this new invention at science camp. He claims, it's this really advanced sort of transmitter. And he says he met a girl at science camp and that they worked on it together. So now Dustin, claiming to have a girlfriend, her name is Suzie, and the brilliant touch is that, in Dustin's own words, she's even better looking than Phoebe Cates. Nailed that 80s reference. Phoebe Cates, that's just so perfect for the time. And I have to say, for me, for 80s kind of cute girl next door types in films, it's basically Phoebe Cates, and then it's Elizabeth Shue from the Karate Kid. You can't go wrong with those two. So it's a great choice from Dustin. But immediately their suspicions are raised because, first of all, a girl at science camp, which I guess is a dated thing, this idea that girls can't be into science, but I suppose in the mid-80s maybe that's quite believable. Then yeah, it wasn't something that happened commonly. So yeah, too good to be true. The fact that she's into science, is a genius, and is better looking than Phoebe Cates. And I guess with Dustin being a bit of a nerd, maybe doesn't have the best of luck with the ladies. Yeah, it's this gag, about, they don't really believe he has a girlfriend. And that's funny of thinking about Steve, who, of course, him and Dustin struck up this great bromance in the second season, which we're going to see more of this season. But yeah, it's funny that the contrast with Steve struggling to get girls, considering his character in the past. But anyway, so Dustin says, I'll show you how this new invention works, and at the same time you can talk to Suzie, because the idea is, so they go off and they set off on this journey sort of thing. They go up this hill, and that's the thing. Dustin says to contact the other side of the country or whatever it is. You have to go up on this high hill. And I'll contact Suzie. You can talk to Suzie. And what I like about this scene is it becomes like a mini mission all of itself. So at one point, one of them, I think it's Lucas, says, we've been gone like 4 hours or something. And so it's a long journey. So yeah, it does become like a mini sort of mission, as I said. And so they get up on the hill eventually, and yeah, not surprisingly, Dustin can't get through to her. You know, he does try, but he can't. And again, that's the suspicion. Again, you know, he's making it up. And there's another bit with like Mike, because he goes off, says an early curfew or something, and Lucas says, they've been doing this all summer. You know, he's gone to see Elle. Because I think Elle went with him because she was pretty sure she was there for that. But yeah, so this is sort of like a mini like mystery for the season in itself. Does Suzie exist? Does Dustin really have this new girlfriend? So yeah, that's obviously going to play out. And actually, when they all leave, lo and behold, he sort of overhears the Russian transmission sort of thing. So we get a bit of that. So yeah, that's all good stuff. Building quite nicely, which I think brings us on to Nancy and Jonathan, or as I like to call them, the Mulder and Scully of Stranger Things. Now, sort of in an interesting place with them at the start of this season, because I'm not as keen on them once they got together, if you see what I mean, which happened last season. You know, in the first season when they were working together and they were striking up the friendship, and, you know, obviously you had the fact that Steve was a jerk in that season, and that's one of the great things is Steve's arc, but at that point, yeah, you were really rooting for them to get together, and you could see their sort of chemistry. And it's this funny sort of TV thing where sometimes when they actually get together, you know, it's almost like the chase is more exciting sort of thing, and it's more interesting when they're not together but they're close and you're willing them to get together than when it actually happens. And I think that's happened a bit with them, and maybe they're just not quite as interesting. But I will say I am interested in what's happening with Nancy this season. So Nancy and Jonathan are obviously together, and they both have this summer intern job, and it's at like the local newspaper. And I think what's interesting is Nancy, you know, because Jonathan's the photographer and she's basically the secretary, the assistant. But, you know, she basically, when we first see them, wants to get up early, wants to get to work early, make an impression. And so I think it is a good arc for her this season. Then she actually has ambition, she wants to get ahead, and essentially she wants to, you know, progress in the company. I mean, it's an internship, so it might not last beyond that. But, you know, she does have those ambitions to be a journalist herself and, you know, do serious journalism. So I think that is a good character beat for her, a good progression to her character. Because, again, if you look at her in season 1, certainly she was a long way from that. So it is good character growth. And again, it's basically dealing with the times because, you know, Nancy has to contend with this horrible, really creepy 80s sexism, you know. So at one point she's in a meeting and it's like an editorial meeting, and she's just there, you know, getting the coffee or whatever she's doing in the scene. And they're obviously looking for ideas, and that's when she sort of uses her intuition, really, and she suggests, you know, a story on the mall. Starcourt, by the way, is the mall's name. But yeah, she suggests like a human interest story about how it's, you know, taking business from small business and what have you. And there's this real dick played by Jake Busey, who is a spitting image of his father. He's, of course, Gary Busey's son, and he plays one of the journalists, one of the reporters at this newspaper. And And he makes all sorts of sexist remarks. I mean, he keeps calling her Nancy Drew, which is a bit on the nose, but you can obviously see the reference and get what he's going for. But yeah, at one point he sort of cruelly leads her astray. He sort of pretends that he's engaging with her idea. He sort of perks up and humans her and lead her down the garden path, only to whip it away and then make some sort of crude sexist remark about she should stick to making coffee or something like that. So yeah, those scenes are really uncomfortable, but they're obviously dealing with the times, the fact that it's the way it was, really. I mean, it's probably still a problem today, but we've obviously come a long way, and it's obviously far more accepted than women can be journalists, of course, but it is dealing with the times. It's painful to watch, but it's also, I think, it's going to pay off well, because Nancy obviously is going to rebel with it. I don't think she's going to let it get her down too much, and sort of she's not going to quit, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So some interesting setup there, and a couple more. Obviously a lot happening in this episode. It's setting up a lot. So returning to the sort of Mike and Al situation, we have Hopper, who has become obviously sort of like a father figure for Al, which I like, having lost his daughter many years ago. It's a nice sort of thing for him that he is now a father figure for Al. But because he's not used to this sort of thing, he's inexperienced. He doesn't know how to handle the relationship with Al and Mike, and it's driving him nuts as well. And he's sort of reacting how Hopper would hop, how Hopper would react. So he approaches parenting as he approaches his work as a sheriff, sort of thing. So he has this rule where they have to keep the door open so many inches, which I sort of love. And at one point he catches them, and Al then uses her power to slam the door shut. So again, it's setting up the fact that Al's powers is going to be a big thing this season. And I think what's going to be interesting this season is the fact that Al's the experience of using her power more, and the consequences, but also the fact that she's going to be basically how does that she's experiencing new things for the first time, and how does she deal with those new experiences because of her background. She's experiencing these things for the first time. So essentially Hopper doesn't know what to do, so he goes to Joyce, and there's a little thing building with him and Joyce, but she obviously sits him down and says, you've got to do it sensitively. You've got to have a chat with them. You've got to be honest and set boundaries, but you've got to do it in a sensitive way. You can't just go steamrolling in. And so she gets him to sort of write this sort of list of things she's going to say. And the funny thing is, you sort of guess that Hopper's probably not going to go along with that advice, but he sort of humours her and actually does the list, and the idea is then that's how he's going to do it, even though he's not. And at the same time, there's this thing with him and Joyce. But anyway, Hopper pulls a dirty one, because later on he tricks Mike into thinking something's wrong with his grandmother. He's like, oh, your mother called, something's wrong with your grandmother. So this obviously shocks Mike. Mike follows him, and it's basically a trick, it's to lure him into the car. And when it's revealed as a trick, Hopper's sort of locked the doors already, so Mike can't escape the car. And obviously Mike's pissed, as you would be. But yeah, it's this sort of devious trick by Hopper, and he takes charge essentially. He shouts at Mike and says, "This is the way it's going to be. We're going to go for a drive, and I'm going to lay down things. I'm going to lay down the law." So that's kind of how we leave it. They drive off and they're having this chat, obviously, and So Hopper. In a way, you wouldn't have it any other way, even though you feel for Mike. But yeah, as I said, there's this sort. I mean, again, not saying how it's going to go, but him and Joyce, I did sort of ship them actually. So if there does turn out to be something, but anyway, you get the impression there is an attraction there. Obviously, they've been building this bond, friendship, whatever you want to say, since season 1. Similar experiences in a way. But yeah, Joyce isn't ready to move on yet, because at the end of season 2, of course, she lost Bob, and Bob sacrificed himself. It was a really good end to his arc, because for a lot of that season we thought, oh, this is just a goofball, bit of a nerd, he's out of touch with the kids, and yeah, then he's not really that great for Joyce, but we actually saw there's a bit more to him at the end of that season. And I think the fact that I like the continuity, and I like the fact they haven't just dropped Bob. It's not like he was a sacrifice and that's it. I like the fact that Joyce is still grieving him at the start of this season, and the fact that it shows that there was something there was a closeness. And there's a really good scene, actually. There's a scene where she's watching an episode of Cheers, again, very 80s, and she gets upset. And the reason she gets upset is because her and Bob used to watch Cheers together. And so I sort of like this almost double sort of thing, where on the one hand, Stranger Things is a very nostalgic show, references a lot of pop culture. And so, again, Cheers, a very 80s sort of show, it's a very logical pop culture references. So I like the nostalgia there, and the fact that someone at home watching Stranger Things can get nostalgic for Cheers being on, because particularly, I mean, I guess I would have been watching Cheers a bit later, but certainly people who are now in their sort of 40s, possibly would have been watching it when it first aired in the 80s. So I like that. So you've got the nostalgia factor for that, but also you're watching Joyce have nostalgia for it because of the fact that then she shared it with Bob. And I think that's a nice little comment on how TV and culture does bring people together, and how it's one of the things why it really matters, the fact that you bond over these things. And yeah, these things really do matter to your relationship, friendships, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, that's a really, really tender scene. I really like that. But yeah, so she's not quite ready to date again, even though Hopper is sort of casually pushing it, and he's sort of trying to position it as more of a friendship type date and not so much a date. But anyway, yeah, it does show you that Joyce isn't quite ready to move on from Bob. And that's almost it, apart from the Billy side of the plot. And yes, so he's going to be interesting this season, because he was such a strange character in season 2. He is, of course, the brother of Max. And yeah, he was, on the one hand, he was inconsistent, because on the one hand he was this nasty bully, and we saw his sort of racism towards Lucas, and so on the one hand he was a very dark, very nasty character, and on the other, you had these more cheesy comic moments with him. You had him, being this bit of beefcake that girls were swooning over. And you had, that really weird scene with him and Karen. Karen's Nancy's mother, which was in the finale, and it's the same episode where he has the big moment with Lucas and the others. So seemed like from 2 different episodes. I mean, I loved the scene with Karen. It was very funny, but yeah, it seemed to be from a different show than the other Billy stuff. So sort of strange, and I was wondering, because obviously I guessed he would be back this season, so I was wondering what sort of role he would take. So Billy is now he's a lifeguard at the local the local pool, and again they're sort of playing up this beefcake angle, and essentially you've got a lot of like middle-aged mums there, and they're all eyeing him up, and they have this routine. They're excited when the other lifeguard goes off duty because they know Billy Boy's coming, so they can eye him up. And one of them's Karen, so she's there, so they're still playing this attraction angle between the two. And they do flirt, and they casually set up a date. And it's an interesting scene because Karen is hesitant, but the way the scene ends is then Billy seems to woo her over because she does smile. And I think it's an interesting thing for Karen because we sort of find out later that she doesn't actually go on the date. I mean, Billy doesn't get there, which I'll get to in a moment, but then she doesn't actually go to the date in the end. We find that out later on in the next episode, but I think very much the writers wanted you to think that is going to happen because we see her getting ready in the next scene, and yeah, we see the two, because Billy's setting off as well. So we're certainly meant to believe the date is going to go ahead. And yeah, I think it's an interesting thing with Karen because essentially I think part of it is her daydreaming of this. The fact that, a lot of times her husband, when we see them together, it's, a very mundane sort of marriage. I think he's normally presented as a bit of a square, a bit sort of dry. So I think the idea is that she's at least fantasizing about something more exciting, and that something more exciting is Billy, for her anyway. I'm not sure, there might be a bit of an age difference with her and her husband as well, but anyway, so I think I read it as she got all dolled up, made up, and, as part of the fantasy almost. So she doesn't actually go on the date, but as part of the fantasy, she does it. So yeah, they sort of tricked us, and they did it well, so can't complain about that. But yeah, the sort of twist to the episode is then Billy's driving, and suddenly his car crashes, like in the middle of nowhere. And he gets out, and he's actually dragged into this barn by like a tentacle. So this alien sort of tentacle drags him in, and that's the end of the episode. So a real twist, and so that suggests they're going to do something with Billy this season. Or is he dead now? Is he a sacrifice? I guess we'll find out in the next episode. But yeah, that's the first episode, and I think it got off to a really smooth start. A lot of good character work going on. Some interesting things set up. Robin obviously was a good new character. And again, it's doing the classic Stranger Things stuff that you want. Really great 80s music, really great pop culture references, fun dialogue and banter with the leads, and some good horror and sci-fi thrown into the mix. So good first episode, really enjoyed it, and it promises a lot for season 3. So there you have it. I'll be back with more soon. But please let me know your thoughts of the first episode of Stranger Things 3 in the comments below. And just to let you know, this weekend I am planning a couple of live streams. Ghostbusters on the Sunday, I will do a live stream watch of that. And there might even be a movie on Saturday, though I can't say for sure. But that would be Bubba Holtec, if that goes ahead. If not, I'll do that another time. But certainly Ghostbusters, I think, is penciled in for Sunday night. Around about just after 10, I'd say, 10:15. But yeah, that's been my review of Stranger Things. So thank you very much. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. Please leave your thoughts on the comment on the episode. Sorry, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you again.